Welcome to update 4.2. We have another round of new weapons and refines for the 3rd anniversary update, and while things have been pretty crazy, we have a lot to talk about in the coming days. Starting us off are the new refines for JAKOB, Barst, Female Morgan, and LASLOW. We have some interesting effects to talk about, so let's get started. First up is JAKOB, who got a fancy new serving tray. JAKOB'S tray is a 14 might weapon, and when JAKOB initiates combat, he inflicts -4 attack, speed, defense, and resistance on the foe during combat. Pretty simple base effect. JAKOB'S tray is essentially a dagger version of the Fox tomes, if you remember the one we got. And combat debuffs are very nice. They are basically the same as stat buffs for your unit, and of course they will stack with regular field debuffs the enemy may have. For the special refine, if JAKOB is within 3 spaces of an ally who has less than 100% HP, he then gets +4 to all stats during combat. Another pretty simple effect. Basically, as long as JAKOB is near a hurt ally, he gets extra stats. So overall, JAKOB'S tray has the potential to give him effectively +8 to all stats during combat, and that is rather nice considering JAKOB has a very balanced set of stats. Nothing is really outstanding, but at least he can fight against anyone. With such a stat-based weapon and refine, you will obviously get more out of it if you have a super merged up, highly invested JAKOB. That's just kind of how most of these refines work for our really old units. While +8 to all stats is nice, it's not like anything else is added on, and JAKOB does have to work a bit to get those bonus stats. For one, he must initiate on the player phase to inflict those debuffs, otherwise he can only get +4 to all stats. Even then, someone else on the team must already be hurt, so that usually means they have started a fight. JAKOB doesn't really want to be the very first unit to fight in a battle, and if he does fight first on the enemy phase, he basically just has a 14 might silver dagger. Definitely something to consider. Maybe a more supportive kit might help him contribute more before jumping into the action. First, let's just talk about straight offensive builds. JAKOB can at least guarantee he gets some bonuses by initiating fights. If you can fight near a wounded ally, the better. To help JAKOB survive more engagements, Sturdy or Mirror Impact can be a nice A skill. You can pair it with the Swift Sparrow Sacred Seal for extra speed. If you want to neutralize some enemy buffs and add on more combat debuffs, then a low B skill is a fun option. I would go with low speed and defense since JAKOB isn't that fast. Besides some of these premium skills, he can also just run the usual Fury plus Desperation plus Brazen Attack and Speed combo. More bonus stats and a huge attack and speed boost is exactly what JAKOB needs to be a better player phase unit. JAKOB'S tray and Brazen Attack and Speed will all stack together, and he still has room for field buffs. Now, if you want JAKOB to be a little more supportive, he can run a Wings of Mercy set. Since he needs to fight near an ally who is hurt, that is perfect for Wings of Mercy, plus JAKOB is initiating combat, so he'll get the full effects from his tray. You can pair this with a bond skill for a ton of bonus stats. Now, before flying in to save an ally, JAKOB can also run a Rally Assist skill with a supportive buffing C skill. This can give him a little more utility rather than just standing around waiting for the action to begin. Last, I will mention using close counter, but it definitely should only be considered if you throw a ton of investment into JAKOB, like +10 merges, summer support, +10 dragon flowers, etc. Now, I wouldn't say JAKOB'S tray is a very suited for close counter, but I feel like it still could work. On the enemy phase, JAKOB can only get those +4 to all stats, and that's only if another ally is hurt, so he should not be your main tank unless you have someone like a Fury user also on the team. If JAKOB does tank hits on the enemy phase, he can spread attack and speed smoke, plus his innate dagger defense and res debuffs on the other enemies. Then on the coming player phase, he can stack the tray's combat debuffs on top for some good amount of power. Even if you can't set this scenario up, if JAKOB can apply the debuffs first, then they just make his enemy phase safer anyway. Overall, not a terrible weapon or refine, but it definitely won't make JAKOB super enticing to use unless you really like him or have already invested in him. His balanced defense and res stats might be one of his more attractive traits, especially since a lot of range units have lopsided defense and res stats. Next up we have Barst, who is one of my favorite units in the whole game because I'm addicted to reposition. I seriously throw that on just about everyone. Maybe I'll regret firing off all those Barst copies because my man got the Devil Axe. For those unaware, the Devil Axe is sort of a staple in Fire Emblem games. It's a very powerful axe, but it has the risk of hurting the user instead, so high risk, high reward. In 3 houses, I think it just deals flat damage after combat, however. So the Devil Axe in Fey grants +4 to all stats during combat, but if the user attacked, they get 4 recoil damage after combat. Alrighty, so this is actually pretty good. The Devil Axe is a Fury type weapon and has the same effects as Fallen Delthia's Death Tome. It grants in combat stats so you can't have those outside of combat, and it only deals 4 recoil damage versus Fury 4's 8 recoil damage. Barst has some decent attack speed and defense stats, so another +4 to all of those is appreciated. For the refined, Devil Axe gets Wrath 3. At the start of the turn, if the unit's HP is less than or equal to 75% and the unit's attack triggers special, grants special cooldown charge -1 and deals +10 damage when special triggers. As a reminder, Wrath is unique in that it can activate mid-combat, so if Barst starts with full HP but drops into Wrath's HP range, he will get the extra damage on special procs. Wrath plus Fury is pretty darn good, and I think Barst can use the Devil Axe quite well. He has a ton of base HP, so he has a lot of room to play with for Wrath's activation range, and there are a good amount of spicy combos to pair with a Wrath weapon. First up, Devil Axe is perfect for the classic Fury plus Desperation plus Brazen Attack and Speed combo. With a plus speed boon, the Devil Axe and Fury 3, good old Barst here can hit 42 speed flat out. Pretty darn impressive, and that goes up even more once Brazen Attack and Speed kicks in. Wrath should be activated during the same time as Desperation, so if Barst can proc special during his 2 hits, that's an extra 10 damage on top. Additionally, if you run a 2 cooldown special, then on the next player phase, Wrath will bring that down to 1 cooldown, which means if no guard effects are in play, Barst can proc that special on his second hit. Moonbow is a safe choice, but if you want to sacrifice a female Byleth for Fury 4, then you can also pick up Ruptured Sky. However, that Byleth also comes with Wrath 3, and boy oh boy, Double Wrath is back. I feel like I'm wrong, but I don't think we've been able to talk about Double Wrath since Valentine's Hector. We now have a new addition to that fun combo. Sothis introduced the Wrath plus times Pulse setup, which can grant -2 special cooldown every player phase once you are in Wrath's HP range. Well, now we can add another Wrath skill via Devil Axe, so that means -3 cooldown every player phase. This is so nasty. Barst can fully recharge a 3 cooldown special like Bonfire, and then also get +20 true damage on top. As long as you don't heal back up over 75% HP, you can do this every new turn. Obviously a very expensive setup, and sadly you can't just use one Sothis to do this. For the Ace Skill and Sacred Seal, any attack boosting skills are great. A Brazen Seal is probably the best option, and you can always run Fury with this set or go with something stronger. You just need some way to ensure Barst lives with less than 75% HP. He will be pretty vulnerable, however. Last, I just want to talk about some other good B skills to pair with Wrath. We got Vantage, and that's a great combo if you can stall a fight out, since Wrath will give Barst 1 cooldown every turn, and once the special gets charged, you can just let Vantage take care of the attacking enemy. Special Spiral is an alternative way to get more cooldown reduction, and it works after every fight, unlike Wrath and times Pulse. Might be a better option if you're going to run Aether or something like that. A low skill isn't as synergistic with Devil Axe, but it's still just another fun skill to use, and attack debuffs can help keep Barst alive. If you want a support option, Sudden Panic could be nice to take advantage of Barst's really high base HP. Overall, the Devil Axe is really neat and gives Barst a nice niche for himself. It won't stop me from following him for reposition, but I think he'll be a fun unit to use from now on. Our third new weapon is for female Morgan. She got her father's tactics, literally. This is a 14 might tome, and at the start of combat, if Morgan has more resistance than the enemy, she gets +4 to all stats during combat. Pretty much a basic res comparison check with the enemy, and it only takes into account stat boost outside of combat. Morgan has 33 base res, which isn't that high, but it can get the job done with some help. For the special refine, Morgan will grant +3 attack and speed to allies within 2 spaces during combat. That is basically a mini gold skill for any ally. Also, if Morgan is within 2 spaces of an ally, she will get the same +3 attack and speed boost during combat. So the special refine is similar to Ranulph's weapon. It's a basic stat buff for nearby allies, but Morgan can also get the same stat boost too. Altogether, Morgan can get herself +7 attack and speed and +4 defense and res if she's within 2 spaces of an ally, and she has more resistance than her enemy. Both are definitely achievable, but like for Jakob, you will have to work for those stat boosts. Getting +7 attack and speed helps Morgan out tremendously in the offensive department, but she has to be near allies for the full bonus, so she can't just wander off too far. Still, it's a great bonus for any +speed boons. Should be noted that Morgan can get all these bonus stats on both phases. For builds, let's start with an offensive usage. First off, Morgan probably wants Fury since it boosts her flat resistance for higher chances at activating Father's tactics. Of course, it's not necessary, but just remember it does the res check before combat starts. If you go with Fury, Desperation is a solid pairing, especially since Morgan has very low physical bulk. One worry about Father's tactics is that if you want Morgan to make an attack, she can move out of range of her allies and she'll lose 3 attack and speed. Not a huge deal, but this weapon only adds bonus stats, so you kind of want all of them. If you don't run Desperation, then flyer mobility skills like aerobatics or flyer formation may suit Morgan. It can help her move around her teammates to provide that attack and speed buff, and she will get to use them for herself. Now, if you used female Morgan with her base kit, it was very defensive in nature. Father's tactics can kind of emulate a similar playstyle, but unless you run a plus res boon with guaranteed res buffs, you may want Fortress Defense and Res for the flat plus 6 resistance. This helps tank mages better and of course activate Father's tactics. If we are going to play more defensively, the refined effect should be easy to activate and we can lean more into a supportive role. A great skill to pair with Father's tactics is Gold Flyers. That is an easy plus 7 attack and speed for your flyer allies. You can even throw in other buffs like Defense and Res Link or an appropriate rally skill. There are a lot of options here for a supportive build, including Ruses, Sabotage, Ploys, Tactics, or other Flyer Emblem buffs like Fortify Flyers. I think Morgan will be a good fit for Flyer Emblem teams that move together. She can act like the flagship for the team, issuing commands and providing support. Personally, I'm a little disappointed in Father's tactics. Usually if there is a 5-star only unit in the Weapon Refined batch, they get a little extra something because, well, they aren't as easy to get. Morgan can get a lot of bonus attack and speed, but she has to meet 2 separate conditions and it kind of forces her to build for resistance while pushing for more attack and speed if you want an offensive mage. I don't know, I just feel like they could have tacked on something else like -1 special cooldown or lean more into the support aspect if they really wanted her to be like her father. Last we have LASLOW, who I wasn't expecting much from, but boy did he get something special. LASLOW'S blade has a kind of confusing base effect, so let's break it down. Basically, it works like Mordecai's Sabertooth Fang, but instead of applying debuffs to the enemy, LASLOW applies buffs to his allies. If you don't understand how Mordecai works, then if a movement assist skill is used by LASLOW or targets LASLOW, grant +4 to all stats to the ally involved plus all allies within 2 spaces of both LASLOW and the ally involved after movement. It's a little complicated, but you must understand that in no point does LASLOW buff himself. I want to make that very clear. As an example, if LASLOW uses reposition on an ally, after movement, both LASLOW and that ally will emit a 2-space buff to all other teammates, plus the ally involved will get the same +4 stat buffs. Again, LASLOW does not get any stat buffs in this interaction. For the special refine, if LASLOW is within 3 spaces of 2 or more allies who each have total bonuses of greater than or equal to 10, grants +3 attack and defense during combat, and LASLOW gets to attack twice. Wow. LASLOW gets a dual phase brave effect, and all he needs to do is be within 3 spaces of 2 allies who have a total of 10 or more stat buffs. If we consider the base effect of LASLOW'S blade, it grants +4 to all stats, which would total up to +16. Therefore, while LASLOW does not self-buff himself, by being near the allies he does buff up, he gains some incredible bonuses. If you can use swap reposition or smite on LASLOW or have him use it on an ally, it should be super easy to buff up everyone on the team. Then you're gonna have 3 spaces to work with, and that is a lot since LASLOW can move 2 spaces forward and still be in range of all his allies. Very important to note that LASLOW has great base attack at 35 and that can become 38 with an attack boon. Combined with a 16 might sword getting +3 more attack and it hits twice in a row, and you have a very good setup. Obviously, panic will be a major threat to this whole operation, so do be wary of that. For builds, LASLOW joins a pretty special club of red units with dual phase brave weapons. Most recent one we got was Altina, but there is also Sword Reinhardt and Keaton. As Altina has proven, distant counter plus Vantage is such a nasty combo with these types of weapons. LASLOW has very good attack and he will still have a good amount of player phase power. The power of DC plus Vantage is being able to tackle pretty much almost any threat on the enemy phase by blowing them up first with 2 Vantage hits. Add on a Brazen Tag Seal and more attack buffs and you have a winning combo. If you go for this setup, a plus attack boon is incredibly nice to have. Besides just Encounter and Vantage, LASLOW can run a bunch of other sets as well. For something more player phase oriented, he can run a solo A skill or even Sturdy Impact should he fail to KO an enemy. Low attack and defense plus attack smoke is also a strong combo for initiating since LASLOW gets more damage and he spreads attack debuffs which can help keep him alive on the enemy phase. Remember, LASLOW does need his allies and they have to be buffed up a decent amount. If you leave him alone, then consider bringing another buffing unit on the team. For example, a double tactics buff user can buff LASLOW and 2 other allies with enough buffs to activate his brave effect. Of course, you can always have LASLOW or his allies use an assist skill to proc the base effect of the weapon, and that's a nice fallback. As an infantry unit, LASLOW has a ton of skill options. For example, if you want to go for a more defensive route, he can run with quick riposte for quad attacks, and he can use the breath A skills for a bunch of special cooldown charges. He can also run heavy blade 4 or 3 as a sacred seal for similar results. LASLOW may also be a good user of null C disrupt builds since he doesn't need quick riposte to retaliate with 2 powerful hits against generally squishier enemies. That said, you may want to raise his res stat if you plan on tackling every kind of enemy out there. All in all, LASLOW'S blade is an extremely good refine. It requires a good amount of setup, but LASLOW can do the job himself and the payoff is massive. Sadly, LASLOW cannot buff himself, but I think it's a fair trade-off, and honestly, you could even build more supportive if you really wanted to. The base effect of the weapon is a neat +4 stat buff similar to a Link buff, and it has a really large range too. He honestly could just be a nice unit to have on any team in general. That's gonna wrap up this batch of refines for update 4.2. What did you guys think of these new weapons and refines? I think we got some real winners this time. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about our Valentine's units in more detail, so I'll see you guys soon.